Welcome, everyone. I was just welcoming everyone here in person. It's good to have face-to-face meetings with people. I'm glad everybody made it down here. I'm going to start out with the land acknowledgement. Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that the land upon which we are undertaking our revitalization efforts is part of the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. In addition, Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that Toronto has historically been a gathering place for many Indigenous people, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples today. So with that, everyone's seen our extensive agenda. I'm going to try and get through as much of the consent agenda as quickly so that we can focus on the more critical issues. There isn't, by editorial comment, much new in a lot of the materials. We do have to approve the financial statements, and we've got a couple of capital approvals to go through. But we'll try and get through the relatively straightforward stuff pretty quickly. I'd like everybody seeing the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve it? Lori and Drew. I've got a limited pool of the talent.
Our arms are going to be sore.
I did like, just
you can rotate who actually
A
moves it.
simple nod will do. Thank you. Any conflicts of interest to declare? No? Okay, turning to the consent agenda, we have all the highlights of the key messages and a number of items there. Lisa, I'm proposing to take most of this as read, unless there's anything that you would like to highlight or any of the committee members have questions on. I didn't note anything new or material rather than an update from last quarter. If I'm wrong, let me know, but any objection to taking that as read? Okay. With all of that, I think we can then move right to the financial statements, your year-end financial statements, which we know Ian has his hand up.
The minutes, which is
Like, oh, yes, you're right. I missed that one. I read the minutes from the February 22nd meeting. Everybody review those. All in favor? Those are carried. And then let's go to the financial statements. We do have to approve for recommendation to the board at next meeting in the 3 weeks, 2 weeks.
Yeah, June 24th.
Our year-end financial statements. Is that Sampata? Are you going to do that?
Yes, no, Sampata's going to do it. I'm going to invite my colleague Sampata Shandane, who's our Director of Financial Management. She's going to provide highlights of our year-end financial statements. Sampata.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning.
Remember to speak up because of this room.
Yeah, I'll try.
Yeah.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody, and good morning to all. Today, I will be presenting before the committee the corporation's audited annual financial statements for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2024. These financial statements serve as a comprehensive reflection of the corporation's financial health, performance, and prudent financial management. And in the brief presentation today, I will delve into certain key operational performance indicators, such as our overall cash position, receivables, revenues, expenditures, and net assets. A draft copy of the clean and unqualified independent auditor's report to be issued by the corporation's external auditors BDO is attached in page 80 of the material. BDO will shortly be presenting their report after my presentation this morning. With that background, we can turn to page 82 of the material, which is the statement of financial position. I'll just give Charmaine a minute to just get to that page in the material.
What page is it again? 82 is it?
Yeah. This is the statement of financial position. The key components that I want to highlight in this statement are cash, our receivables position, and our assets under development. Overall, unrestricted cash of 46.8 million is lower compared to 109 combined investments in cash of 119 million at March 2023 due to two reasons. One of the reasons being utilization of this cash, which is primarily made of Portland's working capital. We're utilizing that for Portland's expenditures. As we are drawing to the end of the project now, we are not asking for any more working capital advance for the project. Rather, we are focusing on using up that cash. And secondly, the second reason is also for the lower cash is also outstanding receivables, which are higher at 117 million compared to 81 million last year. And I'll just break down the composition of these receivables. The main reason for the higher receivables is made up of 55 million from outstanding claims from the city and the province for the Portlands project. While the claim from the province is undergoing final approvals and is expected to be paid shortly, the city's outstanding claim has been realized subsequent to the year end. All of the receivables that are included in this receivables of 117 billion are in normal course of operations of the corporation and have either been already realized or they will be realized in short order. The other significant item that I would like to draw attention to in this statement of financial position is our assets under development, which combined with the expenses that we are showing or reflecting in the statement of financial activities, which is the next page, they account for the total capital investments of 256.8 million made by the corporation during the fiscal year. Now, these are down from 17%, down by 17% from last year, because last year there was a significant acquisition of the Parliament slip, and there is no land acquisition this year. Also, certain Portland's expenditures are lower compared to last year. So those are the reasons why the overall expenditures are lower than last year's. These were really the key items I wanted to highlight in this statement of financial position. If we are fine, then we can just turn to page 83, which is the statement of financial activities, or which is generally understood as the income statement. In this statement, I would like to highlight two major components. One is revenues, and second is our net operating income. Overall, restricted revenues are slightly higher at 207.7 million compared to last year as a result of some Portland's revenues, but combined restricted revenues and unrestricted revenues of 217.7 million are slightly lower, or rather they are lower compared to last year, almost 39% lower compared to last year, because last year we had some land sales from Eastside, which were contributing to the higher unrestricted income. The second item that I would like to focus on is the net operating income. The net operating income of 9.7 million is higher this year compared to last year. We have been able to take advantage of the higher interest rates on our bank balances. There have been a couple of interest rate hikes last year, and we've taken advantage of those, and as a result, we made higher interest income. These are the two items I wanted to highlight in the statement of financial activities. Now, if we can just turn to page 84 of the material, which is really the next page, which is the statement of net assets, or really this is nothing but our equity. Our net assets basically are built up of our investments that we make in our assets under development, combined with our unrestricted surplus. When we make these investments in this assets under development, we build these net assets. But as we transfer out these assets to the governments, we deplete our net assets. As such, you will notice that we have transferred about 72.6 million this year to the City of Toronto. These are Portland's assets, which is the Cherry Street North, which is comprised of the street, the bridge, as well as underlying utilities. And therefore, you can see that these are reflected as a reduction in our net assets. And likewise, they're also reflected as a reduction in our assets under development, which is in our statement of financial position. This was net assets.
Just ask a question on that.
Sure.
I hadn't focused on this before, but we have $1.5 billion of assets on our balance sheet. Is there a set timeline for those to be transferred over to government owners?
Yes.
And what's the test that triggers the transfer?
So we have a timeline for the transfer of the Portland's assets for the next 3 or 4 years. These have been, there is an agreement with the city for the transfer of these assets, and we have a methodology to calculate, these numbers based on the asset packages as they get transferred out of the city. The asset packages are basically linked to our Portland's projects, but they are like units that city recognizes as a transferable asset.
So David, is it generally true that, we get the project done, we get through a warranty period and transfer it over? Is that?
Generally, that is true. Portland's portions of it are slightly different than that. However, these assets also include Bayside, for example. Prime infrastructure has not been transferred to the city as yet, and won't be until it's fully complete after the warranty period is up in the next year.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point out, we have to usually hold it for the warranty period, so the city doesn't want to take it until all those issues have been addressed.
There's an acceptance and then there's an assumption. So the city accepts it on completion, but don't assume it until after the warranty is up.
So 5 years from now, we're gonna have a vastly reduced balance sheet.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It'll just be I guess we won't have anything on our balance sheet, really.
Well, that's the.
Well, hopefully we have other land.
Other land.
At that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
land, yeah. Okay,
So some assets to be transferred under Portland's and some are tied to a plan of subdivision for Bayside and Dockside. So these will be transferred as these kind of subdivisions are assumed by the city.
and is there one very big one for Portland's coming in the next 2 years, or?
There'll be a number of big ones. So the Cherry Street South and Commissioner Street, the way we worked it with the city was they are roads under construction. Essentially, we're leasing them to operate. They'll get turned over to the city at the end of this year. The parks, along with their bridges, the parks will get turned over to the city middle of next year. And then there's Lakeshore Boulevard. And that'll be done.
Okay.
Those are the big.
With this, I think it will be a good time to look at page 91, which will also address some of your questions, Kevin, regarding the composition of these net assets. If you can turn to page 91 of the material. Yes, there are two notes on this page. There's note 13A, which basically shows the composition of our net assets or our equity. And there's another note that shows what our unrestricted surplus of 47 million comprises of. Really, the net assets that we are holding, which is our equity today, is nothing but the land which we still own, which haven't been sold to the developers yet. Again, the 1.5 billion that you were referring to, that is our assets under development, which, as we just discussed, will be transferred in due course. The completion of the Portlands and asset transfer for the Portlands, as well as the plan of subdivisions. And this again, the one component of the equity is the land that we hold. It's the assets under development. It is also the unrestricted surplus that we are building from the land sale revenues and any interest income that we are earning over a period of time. And that unrestricted surplus is a positive surplus or a positive number of 47 million from all of the accumulated land sales as well as interest income. And we use this unrestricted surplus to fund our project expenditures, which are not otherwise funded by the city or the governments. This concludes my presentation on the financial statements, brief one, but if there are any other questions, I'll be happy to address them.
Questions for Simbad or Lisa on the financial statements before we go to BDO? No, pretty straightforward. Thank you. Not sure who's on.
So joining us virtually, I believe we have Rob Claus and Jeff Barrett from BDO, both partners, audit partners at BDO, who will present their report on their audit of our annual financial statement. It's over to you guys.
Welcome, Jeff and Rob.
Good morning. Morning, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to take the reins today and walk through the report here. So if you don't mind going to 2 pages, next page. So just a table of contents. So this is the areas that we'll be discussing here in the next 10 minutes or so. So we'll talk about the audit at a glance, the status of the audit, some certain findings. We'll briefly touch on internal controls and what's done during the audit process. Adjusted or unadjusted differences, and then some other required communications. So if you don't mind going to the next page. So looking at audit at a glance, so our materiality for our audit was $4.5 million. Generally speaking, that's been unchanged over the last at least 3 to 4 years that I can remember going back. And essentially the base and the the way that we calculate that is it's a percentage of total cost incurred, which includes expenses and assets under development, just given the nature of the organization, and that's sort of the size, the driver of the size of the organization and how we would determine the materiality with respect to Waterfront Toronto. During the course of our audit, we do certain procedures to look for things specific to fraud. We aren't engaged to look for fraud, but it is part of our normal procedures that we have to do. And we were not aware of any and didn't come across any specific items with respect to fraud. I guess at this stage, we should pass it over to Kevin, you as the chair, or the farm, just to comment on if you are aware of anything that you should make us know about in terms of fraud or suspected fraud. Sorry.
We have no awareness of any of those issues, thankfully.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear, obviously. Okay, no, thank you for providing your thoughts there. So the audit took place during towards the end of April, and so basically the last week of April and the first week of May. Next slide, please. In terms of the status of the audit, so we're as far along as we can be at this stage, and these are generally typical items that would be outstanding at this point in time. So we will follow up with the legal counsel up to the point of the board meeting, which is later in June, just to update our work up to the report date. We'll get a signed management representation letter from management. We'll perform some other subsequent events procedures up to that June date as well, when the board approves. And then obviously the ultimate approval by the board of directors at such time that occurs later in June. Next slide, please. In terms of audit findings, so these are the areas that we focus a little bit more on in terms of the risk and the amount of procedures and testing that we do within the file. I won't touch on everything in detail here. They're all fairly similar to what was outlined in the planning letter that we had a few months back. But I will touch on the first two just because they're common items within any audit and just important to note. So management override of controls and revenue recognition, these are mandatory risks across any organization, entity, regardless of industry or size, and controls in place. So basically CPA Canada says you have to assume that these are risks in an audit file. And so with the management override of control, so there are times where management, due to its authority, may be in a unique position to override certain internal controls. And we'll do specific testing, and this is tied into our fraud work that we do as well. But from all the testing that we performed, there was no issues or concerns from an audit perspective. And then revenue recognition. So obviously, being the key driver for most organizations, it gets tested to a higher degree in terms of our audit work. And from the testing performed, there was no concerns in regards to revenue recognition as well. And then other areas like accrued liabilities. And then on the next page, if you go to the next slide, assets under development and construction deposits, contribution agreements and delivery agreements. Obviously, these are cornerstone areas of Waterfront Toronto, so we do test them to a higher degree. Deferred contributions, which is also tied into revenue. So from all the testing that we performed in these areas, there was no concerns, and all testing cleared from our side, from the audit side. And then this last item here, just touching on it very quickly. So climate disclosures. So Waterfront has taken the conservative approach a couple of years ago to put in a climate risk disclosure in the financial statements. And as things come more to the forefront, we're actually required now internally to do a consultation memo. So there was quite a bit of work done on the climate risks, and we're satisfied with the financial statement note disclosure that's in there. But I just wanted to make a note that nothing's necessarily changed from Waterfront's perspective, but it is getting under the spotlight and from our end on the audit side of things. And there was a lot of work done this year just to make sure we're satisfied with the note. So no other items here on the audit findings, if you don't mind going to the next slide. Internal controls. So when we go through our audit, we look at certain internal controls, and if there was any significant control deficiencies, we would bring it up here and to management prior to the meeting here. So we're noting here and happy to note that there was no significant control deficiencies noted through our process. Next slide, please. In terms of unadjusted and adjusted differences, so no adjusted differences on the right-hand side of the slide that was brought up by BDO. If there was any adjustments during the audit process, it was management bringing it to us to make some slight changes that occur every single year, just at the start of our audit when we're closing things up from the management side. And then on the unadjusted differences side, there is one item for leasehold improvements for the new location that you guys are in. Management had amortized those assets a little bit early, so it ended up having an understatement of capital assets by 420,000, and then thus net income is also understated by 422,000 because the depreciation expense was too high for the March 31st numbers. And so we've talked to management about this. There's no concerns from an audit side of things. And it'll be rectified throughout 2025 as that number gets fixed essentially during the next year. So next slide, please. And then there's other required communications. So if we were to find something like non-compliance with certain laws and regulations, or if we had any disagreements with management, any other items listed here in terms of litigation issues or such matters like that. This would be the slide that we would bring it up and bring it to the farm's attention. But there was nothing to note and no matters to bring up in terms of this slide. So no issues here. And I think that ends, yeah, so that ends our letter. Any questions in terms of the audit process?
Just again on this transfer of the Cherry Street assets, the 72 million and the many more to come, is that subject to your audit in terms of looking at the agreements with governments and the transfer pricing and the timing? And
yeah, we look at, so management will provide the transfer documents associated with it and then the approval from the city. So we review those documents in our audit process. Yes.
Questions of BDO? Anyone? No? Well, thanks again for your efforts, team, and glad we had a clean audit, and good to note that the management was cooperative as your report outlined. So thanks again.
And I just want to note there is an option for the farm committee to meet with BDO in closed session and camera without management, if they would so choose to. So it's.
So we should let them know now.
I don't see one. Do you gentlemen have any reason to want to see us in camera?
Nothing from my end, Jeff. I don't assume the same for you.
No, I agree.
Okay.
No reason for us to meet in camera unless someone from the committee has a specific question they want to ask us in camera.
You mentioned that you use the verb required with regard to the climate stuff. And I'm just intrigued by the legislation that impacts that, if you know that, and the degree to which that's been expanding over time. Because it's becoming a bigger political issue, but the capacity to estimate the impact is growing too. I saw a story this morning on estimating the climate impact of rebuilding Gaza that was fascinating. So just help me with the legislation and the degree to which you guys are grappling with this more broadly, if you would.
Do you want to handle this one, Robert? Do you want me to? So when we say we're required to, in terms of if there's something in the financial statements, whether it's numbers or notes, if information is in there and if it's material, we're required to audit that, right? So given the developing way climate disclosure is being recorded, either in financial statements if necessary or being disclosed in financial statements, we internally are required to look at that and make sure that we're satisfied with whatever management is saying in the financial statements, that we've audited that. And so, you know, how do you audit when someone says there's no impact or there's nothing that the organization is required to do? So that's why it takes quite a bit of time. So I think we're probably being extra cautious because we're in the initial stages of this. It will develop over time as the actual legislation on what's required from organizations develops. But so we're essentially completing memos and consultations and consulting with our national office to make sure that we can say that what's being disclosed in the financial statements, we're comfortable that we can say as a firm that we've audited that before we sign the financial statements. So part of that is just keeping up with what's required in the legislation, but it's not the legislation that's requiring us. That's an internal decision by BDO from a risk-based standpoint on our side from signing of audited financial statements.
Gotcha, thanks.
Okay, thanks, guys. Let you go.
Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Yeah.
I guess now we can take that. Is there a resolution to approve the financial statements up there? Maybe we could pull that up. Or actually not as much approving them as recommending them for approval to the board. So we have it there.
Moving slowly.
Oh, that, okay. Just the one line. So we see the line there. Can I get that motion? Seconded, all in favor? Okay. Okay, over to the Portlands. Lots going on as usual, and actually lots of good news this time in terms of
There is.
cost reductions and probability of completion. So over to you, David.
Thank you. So for the first presentation is just an update on the project progress. So let's go through the slides, Charmaine. Some of the site progress. This is just the latest propeller shot. Of note here is it almost looks like the Moon River Valley is connected to the Don River. It isn't quite. You can see there's actually a slight difference in the watercolor. And we have a photo of that, what we call the North Plug. The other item to note here is the old Cherry Street lift bridge on Cherry Street has now been removed. You can see that there's no bridge there, just to the east of our new Cherry Street bridge. And Cherry Street, while it's open, is closed at that location, both north and south of the Keating Channel. Next. Speaking of the old Cherry Bridge removal, so it is, these are in progress photos. The bridge structure has been removed. There was an abutment on the south side of the bridge, which was the structure supporting the lift mechanism. That has also been removed at this stage. So this work is essentially 100% complete. Next. In Polson Slip, just between the Cherry Street Bridge South and the Atlas Crane, you can see the revetment, the armoring of the mouth of Don River. So this armoring is consistent across Canoe Cove and will be installed underneath the Cherry Street Bridge into the mouth of the new river once it is fully opened. Next. From the top of one of the promontories on Promontory Park, looking south towards Polson Slip and the Canoe Cove, you can see on the right side there is essentially a beach access to Canoe Cove, one of two that will allow people to access that area with their wakeboards, not wakeboards, but paddleboards and canoes and kayaks. Next. This is the same promontory, looking at the mechanically stabilized earth wall that forms the structure of the canopy that will be clad with stone once the park is finished, and the spectacular views of downtown that we're expecting from this area. Next. View of the other side of the promontory. This is looking still looking south, but the wall faces north towards the city. Next. MT35 foundations. So we will be remembering those, I guess, in the ground plane of Promontory Park. So the foundation line will be recreated in the finishes, so that we have a reminder of this, one of the last marine terminal buildings on the Toronto waterfront. Next. From the wetland in River Park North, looking back towards the South Cherry Bridge, you can see that there's a substantial amount of work that's happened here. And in fact, these wetlands are mostly complete from a vegetation perspective, and we're just letting them grow out, and they are, as you will see shortly, I think, in this deck, they're being quite well utilized. Next. In the River Park North, part of the nature play area, nature activity area, this is the Badlands play scape. So we are reconstructing or constructing a mock-up of the Cheltenham Badlands here as part of the water play area. It's pretty spectacular, actually. Next.
So that's going to be filled with water, that?
Not filled with water. There will be water jets, water cannons, water spray, and what's very
It's a
interesting
water
about-
play area for
Yeah.
kids.
What's interesting about them is that in order to activate any of those features, you need to have two children or a child and an adult. You need to have two people, essentially, one to pump and one to spray.
Oh,
And if you don't have two, you won't be able to get going.
Yeah, so the whole premise of that is to get the kids to learn to work together.
How big is, I don't think I knew.
You
I don't remember
so
this
how
either.
big is it? It's
So, well,
it's pretty substantial, actually.
and the Cheltenham Badlands are in the news now because they're about to be reopened. Is this the thing northwest of
Yeah.
the city?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's been
Up-
closed for a while,
up
and
in
now it's
Caledon.
reopened. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. What's it named? Sorry. what's
Oh,
it-
this is, it's made of concrete and shotcrete. And we did two mock-ups for the architects and the contractor to get the hang of what it looks like. And then this is the actual installation, let's say.
Reference to Cheltenham.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and we had toured Minister Fraser at the time that this was coming together, so he got a chance to see that as well. So
and
Is this just
opening,
reopening? It's been closed for some reason.
It's been closed because it was eroding, so I think they were trying to slow down the erosion from all people showing up to take selfies.
It's very popular.
Yeah, it's very popular. This one will not erode because it is.
It's concrete.
Yeah, it's made.
when's the opening?
not go.
Next June,
Next year, okay.
about a year from now. Just over. Next. Just some of the play equipment in the nature play area. So there are zip lines and swings and log rides. Quite a lot of fun for adults and children, I think. Next. Just more of the same. You can see the various structures.
Is that right where the Badlands thing is too, right there?
Yeah, same place.
It's park.
And then to the east of Fire Hall 30 is the dog off leash area, so a fairly substantial area that is being constructed for pets. Next. As I mentioned, the north plug, you can see the line of the concrete retaining wall or the cutoff wall that we constructed that is now separating. The excavation to the north is now complete. We have started putting river finishes in that area. And you can see it's a little different than the rest of the work that we've done because we're actually doing this work in the wet. It wasn't pumped out and all the work not done in the dry. So all of the environmental protection measures we're doing, all of the finishes are actually going into the water. Slightly different process for sure. Next. I won't talk a whole lot about this, but just showing, we are still working kind of across the site from the north end to the south and east to the west. Of note, of course, we have reopened Commissioner Street, opened the Commissioner Street Bridge, and opened New Cherry Street north of Commissioner Street.
So
Along
where,
with, of course,
just for orientation, where's the Badlands on that picture?
the Badlands is
On there or is it farther?
Yeah,
east?
no, it's on there. It's about where it says, where you see River Park North in the orange, just below the Commissioner Street.
Okay, yeah.
It's where the word river is approximately, is where the.
And just north of that is the kind of the event area. Is that?
No, the event,
Just
the
to the
event
west
area is
of it.
actually on the west
Just to
side.
the west of it.
Ah, okay, okay.
Yeah, in Promontory Park. Next. So just to mention, we've awarded almost 100% of project contracts and subcontracts at this stage. Balance is just some minor finishes and equipment that haven't been required as yet. So that will be bought out over the course of the project. Next. And for the next period, you can see we'll continue that process and continue construction. Next. In terms of complaints, 15 complaints received January to March, largely to do with congestion, Lakeshore Boulevard, and have been. So, and I'm sure they'll pick up with the additional work on the Gardner that's been happening. It's probably congestion worse. So I'm not expecting that at the calls we get. In fact, I know that the calls we get have stopped or gone down. We're getting calls that we can't do anything about because they have to do with the Gardner work that we have nothing to do with. So. But we respond to all. And
regardless of whether it's our project or something.
Farther west on the Gardner is taking more of the complaint heap.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Except we're getting those calls, unfortunately.
Are you?
Yeah.
You're on 250% increase. In
Yeah, that report just came out. Yeah.
Next. With respect to Indigenous communities, we continue to work with MCFN and other Indigenous communities, particularly with respect to we've got a number of installations that are being worked on, designed, and will be implemented throughout the park and river areas. We have not had MCFN representatives on site for a while. However, for monitoring, our aquatic habitat monitoring, etc., they are undergoing some changes within their organization that preclude them from attending, but we continue to let them know what we're doing and work with them as best we can.
So if I can just comment on that. So there's a new chief and executive that they're reestablishing their working groups with us. So they're reviewing and making sure they have the right capacity. So Chief Salt actually has been great to work with. We're going to take her on a tour. She did join us for the opening of the pedestrian bridge and spoke very highly of the relationship we have with them. So I think, that relationship will continue to grow, but it's been very positive. And she comes from BC. She's very into British Columbia. She started here, but she worked in British Columbia, came back, was elected chief, has a very strong economic development background. And that's going to be really good for our conversation. Sorry, Dave.
It's okay. Next, Charmaine. With respect to, actually, okay, you can go to media events. That's probably, hold on. Go back one. I do want to show that play equipment. Picture you see there is the Snowy Owl. We've started the installation of the Snowy Owl on site. It's going in the same place as all the rest of the major blades. In fact, it's just off to the side of the Badlands. It's a 10 meter? 7, close enough. 7 meter tall wood structure that takes the form of a snowy owl and is actually an amphitheater for kids to put on plays and things. So that will be, we'll see more of that shortly on site. Next. And with respect to media events, so we are looking to still hold an event for governments to celebrate the West Plug removal. The removal has started. It won't be complete until July. So we're trying to find a time when we can get all the governments together for that milestone. We are looking to do a similar milestone when we remove the North Plug and connect the river to the New River Valley and actually have flow through the river. There are a number of other things that are planned, like a park naming event. There is renaming of the island itself that we expect will happen this year, I think. Then an idea for an inaugural paddle of the full loop of the area around the Villiers Island sometime next summer. And then we're working with city parks to look at what day 1 through 100 looks like for the parks once they open next spring. So
So we're working with all 3 levels of government around a communication packages throughout this whole development. So
What's the process for the renaming? If it's gonna happen this year, do they have a committee? Is there public engagement? There must be.
all of that, yes,
Yeah.
I believe so.
City?
City, yeah.
The city's doing it. Being, I think it's really being spearheaded by Councillor Fletcher.
Just in our,
It's in her board.
in terms of our role as, you know, publicity garners for this, is it time again for us to have a tour down there, the board? Is
I
that?
think so.
It's been a while, and I
You're
think it'd be
you're
good
gonna
if
see some really interesting photos at the board meeting. They're not in this package.
this summer we should get an event where we, even if it's just 2 hours for you to walk us around and show us and get as many, because I haven't walked it for a couple of years. And I think I missed an event, but that would be great if we could do that. And I think to be interested in the board for doing that.
So Kevin, we're just waiting for the new federal rep to be appointed and any renewals. So after we have that, we're gonna try to set something up.
If I could just say, just one thing on an observation in some of the conversations we've had as I'm on day 11. So I would almost separate in the communications side and defer to Cameron here a little bit, but sort of 2 different phases. There's like the steady drumbeat leading up to opening and relentless drumbeat. But then the second thing is in this conversation I heard just mirrored what I've experienced, which is the level of quality and excellence that's about to spur the imagination of the city next summer is unrivaled anything we've done in this city in decades, right? The Badlands, the indigenous design elements around it, the Promontory Park North, on and on and on and on. And so this isn't just an opening. This should be a months-long lead up to a celebration that the city will be a part of, right? So we talked about, board tours, school group tours leading up to it. How do we partner across the city to make this opening more than just another park opens, but a new island has emerged and we're at the center of it. So, and I think that opportunity is, this is a once in a couple decade opportunity.
And I think it changes the storyline on that. Actually, you had in the Metro Morning interview with David Common, where it's just, buildings, buildings, buildings. I like the architecture, and then that changes the balance completely, right? And there's stuff we can do here on connectivity, right? And we just talked, but it's immense, right?
It's a huge opportunity.
I agree.
I'm sure Olivia Chow and Doug Ford think of it that way as well.
Yeah.
But I'm just, nobody knows,
That's
right? Like just this conversation, as a former member of the extended Waterfront Toronto family, I'd seen these presentations a million times. And then walking through Pina and the remarkable team, showing them this is transformational. In the same way when the bridges emerged, then the public consciousness awoke. When these open, and to how we tell that story, lead up to that story, build it out, bring all our partners in. This is where suddenly people are going to say, the waterfront is this opportunity.
Once we opened the bridges and the roads and people could see what we were doing, it was a turning point, because before it was a construction site nobody saw unless you were flying through Portland, right? So we've got the opportunity now to create the storyline of what this hall, visually what this is going
There's
to look
actually
like.
going to be a day when it opens, or is it a continuum? Because you're going to have to plan for that day, because getting down here, more people are going to want to come down than can easily, right? Especially in the early days. So there's a lot of planning.
Yeah.
That discussion is ongoing with the city right now, but some of the thoughts are that there could be a soft opening.
Yeah.
Before, and I think June 21st is the day that's being discussed, because
It's Indigenous Peoples' Day.
so just in advance of that, start to let people see what's there, and then on that day, it'll have been open, but that will be sort of the first part of probably a full summer of events.
So in 2 weeks, kidding.
Yeah. Let's put the year in there.
When Tulsa opened, mentioned me, it was a 100-day opening.
It was.
Because it engaged all the different groups who were involved, right? The paddling, you think about this, the paddling community, you name it. And so this is, we have a year to work on this.
Have you been to Tulsa? You have.
I have, yeah.
Have you been to Tulsa? You should go down. I've been.
Have you seen the
They have a
Gallup?
connection to Tulsa, actually, a weird connection to Tulsa, and I've been there twice, and I
It's
wasn't there at the opening and stuff, but it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
right? And so you can learn from that.
Well, we actually had, as part of the business plan, that we're engaged with government, sounding with Tulsa. So government's got to hear about what Tulsa did and what they wish they did. And actually it aligns with very much what they said they wish they did is what we're actually doing. So it actually is like very nicely.
Okay,
Okay, I think that's the update presentation. The next report was issued as an addenda yesterday. I'm not sure that anyone had a chance to read it. I will describe if we go to the next page. This is a replacement of the semi-annual update that was in the farm book. We have replaced it because the previous report identified 3 potential scenarios for how we were going to be moving forward. And essentially what this is related to is how we will deal with 2 projects that we've not been able to fully complete as intended originally. One is the Eastern Avenue flood protection, which essentially is a providing a flood barrier at the Eastern Avenue underpass. Metrolinx has already removed that underpass as part of the Ontario line, so we can't do our work, physically impossible. So there was a discussion about how we would address that component of the project. The other is the sediment debris management area. We can't complete that fully because of the current location of the Gardner Expressway structures. So we undertook to do an interim SDMA, and that after some discussion and providing backup to the governments have accepted that the interim work we've done satisfies their requirements and our requirements under the contribution agreement. So what we've got here is now an agreed approach on how to deal with those 2 projects. The previous report sort of didn't have a final determination. And the agreed approach is that governments will modify the scope, or we will modify the scope of the contribution agreement just to address the work that has been completed on the Eastern Avenue flood protection, and which is essentially design and other parts of the work, not any physical construction. And the balance of the funding for that project that from the 3 levels of government will go into the contingency. And if we need it, we will be able to use it for deal with risks or items that require us to do that. And then we were also retaining within our budget $12.9 million for the future sediment debris management work. There was some discussion about how that would actually work because we can't simply transfer that other government's money to in between governments, if you will. So what was agreed is that 12.9 million will be moved to contingency as well. Will, in all probability, portion of it will be used to remove some of the excess soil on site that we've been discussing with Creatio over the past year or so. And then the balance will also be in the contingency. So what that has resulted in is a new estimate for our hard costs, EAC of 1.181 billion, and soft costs of 227 million. So let's move on. Charmaine. Next slide. So current program, just as a reminder, our total budget is 1.354 billion, which is comprised of 2 projects essentially. There's the Portland's flood protection project at 1.272 billion and the Parks Finishes project at 81.1 million. That reflects the additional funding of 169 million that was confirmed last year. Project schedule, our current project schedule is that substantial completion will be achieved on January 16th. And the parks will be completed and open by the end of June of 2025. Next. Project risks, just to note again, awarded about 99.4%, we've awarded 99.4% of the project costs, subtrades. with a little bit to come. Next. I won't talk about the current status because we just saw pictures of it. So let's skip the next 3 slides, I think. Good. So where do we stand today? As of the end of March, given the agreed approach from governments, I mentioned that the escalated hard costs are now forecast to be 1.08 million or billion, 227 million in soft costs. That results in a contingency balance of 39.5 million, which is higher than it was in September, as you can see, by about $7 million. So all good news and very beneficial. I'll talk about what the probability impact of that is in another slide or two. Next, and please do stop me at any time.
What does all that mean as to when this sedimentary area is no longer a sedimentary area?
So
reopening the bike lanes and all of that, which I think is part of that, isn't it?
it will be part of that, although we're still debating whether we reopen the bike lanes only to have them shut down as soon as the Gardner work starts. So that's something we need to still discuss with the city in terms of how do we coordinate that work. There's also going to be work on by Metrolinx across the Don starting up, I think, later this year as they rebuild the bridge for the Ontario line and the Lakeshore GO line. So it's unlikely that the connection from the Don River to the Portlands is going to be fully functional and available for several years yet because of the continued work that's going on.
And that's be going from our fault to somebody else's fault.
Yeah, indeed, we'll be able to point at somebody else.
Okay.
I'm going to admit I read the old SDMA report. It took me longer than I want to admit to figure out what SDMA was, but
that's right. That's bad. I should never do that.
But I struggled through it to try to figure out what was going on. So now that you've resolved it, what gets left undone and what is the consequence of that?
So what gets left undone is essentially a little bit more excavation. So we're not able to excavate fully the area. I don't have a drawing handy, I don't think. Not able to fully excavate the area north of Lakeshore Boulevard.
And west of the river.
And yeah, on the west side, on the west side of the river where the Gardner ramps come down, where the Gardner ramps to the Don Valley are. So we're excavating as much of it as we can without actually undermining the Gardner itself. So that needs to happen. The other thing that
in order to protect against flood risk.
No, so I'll get to that. I'll tell you what the impacts are. Then there's a soil management component where there's going to be a dock. There will be areas for TRCA and Ports Toronto to manage the dredgeate that will be coming out of that area because that is the sediment management area. So that's what the finishes are. What we've done in designing the interim solution is we have designed it so that we are achieving regulatory flood protection. So we are complying with the legislation. What we can't comply with is the additional 50 centimeter freeboard that we're trying to design into the entire system. However, the environmental assessment notes that the freeboard is I'll say nice to have. It's do it where it's feasible. If it's not feasible, you're not obligated to do it. It's not feasible for us to do it in this area. So essentially, we're designed and have designed to meet the requirements of the EA from a flood protection perspective. Just not that a little bit more to deal with the future storms as a result of climate change. That's what will happen in the future once the Gardner work is done. So
somebody else will do that work.
Somebody else will do that. So what we were looking at doing was potentially transferring this funding to the city. But as I said, transferring federal and provincial money out of our project to the city, probably not actually doable to start with. And it's only a portion of the funding that's required to do the work because it's based on 2021 dollars as opposed to 2033 dollars. So the city said, well, look, we've got an unfunded liability now with respect to soil that's being left on site. We've got an unfunded liability in the future with respect to the SDMA. So why don't we take the funding we have available now, deal with our current unfunded liability, and we will have to make up the difference in the future with that future unfunded liability. Is essentially what has transpired.
What work is being done on the Gardner down there as part of this longer term plan? Are all those ramps coming down or?
Well, yes, so the entire Gardner from Cherry Street to the Dawn roadway will be moved north a couple of, probably 100 meters. I don't know that it's much more than that.
Okay.
It will move closer to the rail corridor. So the ramps will in fact change, the ramps that connect to the Don Valley. And as I mentioned, we'll be building, or the city will be building new ramps from North Keating onto and off of the Gardner from Lakeshore Boulevard.
And the province will then own it once that city work is
Part of the new
complete.
deal.
That's right.
And that's what would necessitate our changes to the Broadview East.
Yes, and that's right. And then the Broadview Eastern, it does is actually flood protects. It flood protects a bunch of things now. It flood protects the new Ontario line hub at East Harbor. It protects Eastern Avenue. It protects the new underpass for the extension of what's the name of that street? Broadview, thank you, the Broadview extension. And it actually flood protects the current BMW site. So
Plays in well to our next agenda item.
yes, it does. So I won't get into the details of how the numbers all relate to one another. So this is just a breakdown of how the construction cost estimate has changed, given what we've just talked about. Go to the next slide. And this is even more detail on that. Next slide. Soft cost estimate variance. So soft cost has gone up by about 400,000, and that is mostly related to extension of consulting costs to the end of the project, offset by some reductions that in forecast costs that we were carrying. Next. Contingency. So I noted contingency has increased. This is the contingency from our system. So it's actual costs reflected in our system as at the end of March 24th. The other numbers that we're looking at are forecasts based on risk contingencies that our risk consultant is managing and overseeing. Next. Won't get into the whole all the detail on the changes to the risk register. We can go to the next slide. There are changes to the cost risk that have been incorporated since September. 22 risks have been retired, resulting in a $6.7 million decrease. 16 risks have been added, resulting in a $15 million increase. And that is largely the 12.9 million that got added to the risk register from the future SDMA costs. So it's actually a positive thing as opposed to a negative thing. And then some changes made to existing risks account for a further decrease in the expected value. So what we're seeing here, generally speaking, is that risks are being retired. They're either have been realized or they're not actually risks anymore, and we've moved them from the risk register. So we do expect to see that we've been running on average about 2 million a month. We've seen that actually reduce. That's in terms of how much contingency we've allocated every month to changes. We've seen that actually reduce over the past 6 months. So, and we're expecting that that will continue. Next. So this is our probability. So at a 90th percentile, the probability of completing at 90% is 1.351 million, which is actually lower than the budget that we have. So if you look at the fourth bullet, percent chance of the project not exceeding the target budget of 1.354 million is 96.5%, or just slightly higher than it was in September. So very positive results. And this is the same thing, just shown slightly differently. With the March forecast showing the $1,081,000,000 and 227 million, 5 million in non-recoverable HST for a total base cost of 1.3 billion, contingency of 39.5 to give us our $1.354 million total budget. 354, right? Yeah. think that's it.
So,
No, other than risks, we should. Go ahead.
so not holding you to it. Talk to me like I'm a German shepherd. What could we come in at? And the money goes back into the fisc. Is there any chance that we could keep the under?
So that'll be a discussion.
Operationalize it? That'll be a discussion.
That'll be a discussion. I mean, obviously, our key focus right now is just getting the project done and making sure, but that conversation, obviously, as we get closer to spring of next year, will start to occur to say, okay, because we're not giving away anything until we know.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Normally it would go back, but it means.
it would
it's the
normally go
benefit
back.
to us.
and it's probably gonna fit into the broader discussion of the money that we're gonna get, right? So, you know, somebody may say, you know, we're gonna let you keep it as part of our contribution to the next, but that's a conversation that needs to occur only after we're sure. Right, I'm not giving anything away.
But do you want, you're thinking, yeah, exactly, okay.
So with respect to risks, you can see the SDMA deferred scope. While we show it as a risk, it's actually a positive transfer. We're, you know, assuming we're going to spend some percentage of it. Our estimation is probably 9 to 10 million on soil removal, but we're working with the city and Creatio to better define that. And then the balance of that contingency will be available for other risks. And then we are carrying about 5.7 million expected value in the risk register to satisfy some subcontractor claims that Elliston are negotiating. And then a variety of other risk issues that we've identified in the risk register.
You want to keep us moving here?
Absolutely.
I think we've covered that well. Thanks for that report. We need to hear from BTY now, I think, on their update. I didn't, just in the interest of time, I didn't notice a lot to update us on, but I'll turn it over to you guys and let us know what we need to know. Sure, is it Luis?
So, yeah,
Luis.
good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's well. Actually glad to hear David with some of the explanations and the information he has given. I think we have a little discrepancy in some of the numbers, but I understand it's just because it was an evolving topic about this allocation or reallocation for the SDMA. So I understand that. So probably that will vary a little bit from my report. And it's understandable because it was work in progress when we had the conversation. So in terms of budget, we are not really concerned. We still believe chances are high for the project to be delivered on budget, which is great. And it's one of the main areas of concern. The only thing, and I'm going to be brief on my intervention, is about schedule. We've been monitoring closely, and we understand that right now the group divided the flood protection achievement as a different milestone and left substantial performance for a later date just because of seasonal work that has to happen, and that cannot be achieved at the same time as the flood protection itself, that we consider as the substantial completion date, basically. I know that there have been some good news about Toronto Hydro work that has been achieved after the report was issued. So we understand that the possibilities of bringing that achievement of flood protection to December 2024 again are high, and we're still monitoring that. So we're constantly participating in those discussions. We have that as a yellow indicator in our report, but it doesn't mean that we're really concerned. We're still confident that the team is doing a good job and that can be delivered on time.
Okay, any questions for BTY? Thanks, Luis. Appreciate that report and good news.
Yeah, we're actually really happy to hear what's going on. And again, it's a great job and you guys should be really proud of it.
Tell everybody that, Luis.
Tell all your friends.
Okay, this is, all of that was for information purposes. We now have one for approval on, the city wants to give us some more money on Broadview East. So, why don't you give us, is that you again, David? It is.
It will be actually Don Forbes, who is our director, directors responsible for this project, will walk us through the important parts of this request.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, David. So we're seeking additional approval to expend capital funds on the Broadview Eastern Flood Protection Project, increasing our spend to approximately $34 million. We've recently completed the 60% design and have entered into a new delivery agreement with the city to carry us through to the end of February 2025 with funding to complete our design, initiate procurement, and extend our pre-construction services for the construction manager PCL on the project. Additional work that will be undertaken soon is the demolition of the old Eastern Avenue Bridge. We already have funding approval from that from this group. The city is yet to fund that. They need to approve a construction agreement at council in June or July of this year, and at that point, we'll enter into another delivery agreement for the funding of the demolition work, and then full funding of the construction of the project will come in the new year.
So Don, just to clarify, that bridge is not an active bridge right now. So
That's the little rail, you know, yeah.
The metal one. that
Yeah,
crosses.
Yeah.
You'll see you
has
walk,
been used.
walking it, yeah.
so it's not going to impact anybody.
It's not the fly.
No.
Yeah.
Enbridge is across that one or the other one?
No,
Enbridge-
Enbridge is adjacent.
Yeah, they're actually across another smaller structure adjacent to that bridge. And then, of course, there's the Enbridge line that crosses Lakeshore Boulevard where we've been dealing with them. So that's a separate one.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, just in terms of context, a fair amount of this is as a result of the new deal between the city and the province, where the decision was made rather than doing an interim flood protection, so regrading and a small portion of flood protection landform, we are proceeding with the full flood protection solution for Broadview Eastern, so that we need to carry on the design for that. We've completed now, I think, the 60% on design plan. We're now moving forward with the new plan.
And Don, just to clarify, this request is conditional on us getting the money from the city, right?
Yes, and the only money that we don't have from the city right now is the bridge demolition and the full construction. We have the funding agreement with them for all the design and pre-construction services to the end of February 2025.
Great.
And remind me again, there's a construction management fee that covers the staff time to execute on this included in all of those budgets?
Our project management fees are included.
How do you handicap this? Are we going to get the money from the?
Well, as Don said, we've got most money for most, just and we probably have the money for the construction part but we've got to follow the city's process to get them to sign off on that funding. We've actually already gone out to tender on that piece of work, haven't we, Don?
Yes, we have. We have our our demolition contractor on board because we did get some early funding for design and permitting costs for that team. The project really needs to be funded because when they construct the East Harbor Transit Hub and put to the Broadview extension underneath the Metrolinx rail corridor, it opens up the Cadillac Fairview transit-oriented community development to flooding. So in order to allow that project to go ahead, the Broadview Eastern Flood Protection Project is absolutely necessary. So I don't foresee any risk in not getting this project funded.
So again, there's a motion to move this on. I think we've had some discussion here. Unless there's further questions, there's a motion on page 207. So we'll be making that recommendation to the board, subject to the funding from the city. Can I have someone make that motion? Lori, seconded by Drew. All in favor? Okay, carried.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Don.
Don called the finger pulse.
Close isn't buried.
Lisa, can we take the insurance program review as read? Is there anything?
We can. I did want to just highlight that we have successfully maintained or enhanced our existing coverages for 24-25 while limiting the overall premium increase to less than 2% from last year. And also we were able to double our third-party liability coverage this year from 10 million to 20 million with a very limited increase, and maintained our 20 million coverage for directors and officers. So We also, in terms of adequacy, our coverages are in line with our most recent third-party risk review, as well as we had benchmarking done by our broker hub just 2 months ago. So we're all well covered.
Ironic that our coverage is going up while our risks are going down, but that's good.
Well, I don't know that our risks are going down. Like every time we finish a project, we do have a third-party exposure,
Oh,
like
right,
foot
on
and
the
holes and things like
tail.
that. We always get pulled into the chain of liability.
Trip.
Yeah.
Because that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that and congratulations on that coverage. Any other business arising before we go into closed session? Seeing none, I'll give Charmaine a second here and let's go into closed session to go.
Yes.
Extensive discussion, the resolution, they're up there. Can I get a motion on the integrated annual report? Seconded, all in favor. Can I get on the Quayside Capital approval of 112.8 million?
Me first.
Seconded, all in favor. That's carried. The next one is,
Minutes at the start.
oh yeah, the minutes. Sorry, I missed that one. We've reviewed the minutes. Any comments? No. Motion, Lori seconded, approved. And our last one is on the recommendation of the board on the 5 million, I'll call it. By Drew, seconded, all in favor. I declare all those carried. We'll take a motion to adjourn. Our next the meeting's on the 24th of June. Gather. We're gonna have the director's only discussion here to follow. Okay,